The NSE 20 share index was up 0.96% this week to settle at 3,599.40 points. Analysts expect the market to remain bullish with improved market activity, especially in the financials, as well as the commercial services sector pushed by Safaricom, Kenya Airways, among others. The shilling seems to begin losing ground against the US currency. It was trading between 76.65 and 76.85. It is expected to further weaken amid fears about sovereign debt as well as the U.S. economy. Joining us in studio now to look at the highlights from the Nairobi Stock Exchange this week is Hinga Waiyaki, the CEO of Waiyaki and Associates. Hinga, thanks for joining us.
Good evening to you.
We've seen a marginal rise on the NSE this week. What are some of the dominating counters and what necessitated the movements?
Well, I'd start off foremost to say about the Safaricom, which has been the usual boy in the play. What happens is that there's still a lot of profit taking if you look at the rise in the price and at the close of the week, because today closed at 5 shillings 55 cents. It had reached a rally of 5.75. Then we have Mumias. Mumias posted some very positive results in terms of its increase in net profits. You find that it has gone up by about 49%, and also the diversification in terms of their power generation. This will boost in terms of activity. If you notice today's close, Mumias closed at 10 shillings and 25 cents over the period. You notice that's a significant rise on its end. Then we also need to look at other factors that are coming into play. There's the onset of the rains that has been continuous. There's a lot of political goodwill that is going on. If you go by the recent sentiments with the Hague trials, the government cabinet coming on board and showing positive outlook towards it, and a lot of other things. But if you also look at in terms of the growth prediction of about 3.5% of the economy, then you can put all this into play and realize that it's slowly by slowly the market is now forming a V in terms of coming out of what was the economic downturn in 2009.
You've talked about Mumias Sugar, and if you could just delve into that a little bit. The company has diversified into power generation, is now giving into the government grid about 28 megawatts, yes. And it's been on the radar this week. What is your investor recommendation for it going forward?
I'd say it is an investment that you need to look at it from two approaches: long-term, and in the sense of eventually the dividend income will go up. Because in terms of the long-term approach, as more demand for power increases, Mumias will also be a part and parcel of a player in terms of power generation, and the demand from KPLC in terms of the power that is required. As the economy grows, industries will thrive, and there'll also be a demand for power, which Kenyan may not be able to sustain because owing to a couple of things, like with the onset of the rains, the repair and maintenance of some of these power stations, and also there's the issue of the power generation in terms of the diesel generations. The Mumias option might be cheaper in terms of power being brought onto the national grid.
Still sticking with energy, KPLC seems set to boost their revenue lines. They've just signed a deal with Safaricom to provide fiber optic capacity. Definitely set to boost their revenue, the revenue lines. What's your outlook for that stock?
I'd say it's a very positive outlook for two reasons. One, like you mentioned, with signing this partnership in terms of leasing its power lines. It's gone into the fiber optic business, whereby it has leased part of the lines. It has about 18 lines running from Mombasa to Nairobi. 3 have been leased. One major lease is to Safaricom, which took up a 20-year lease. There's the likes of Jamii Telecom, which has taken a year-on-year lease, which will be varied according to the terms. But when you look at it in terms of profits for this financial year, there will be a very high increase because they will factor this. The lease payment for the lease will also be part in terms of the revenue income. And going forward, when you look at the things that have been affecting the fiber optic cable, vandalism, it's much more difficult to vandalize the power cables as opposed to the cables that have been laid on the ground. So going forward, and Safaricom signing on board is a very big, is a positive step to other players to realize that this might also be a viable option in terms of infrastructure. It will also reduce costs because Kenya Power has taken that initiative. So anyone else coming on board, it's cheaper to lease as opposed to laying your own infrastructure. So there it is. When you look at those instances, then it is positive.
Before we quickly get into your top stock picks for next week, your view on Access Kenya. They've just acquired OpenView Systems, also diversifying into WiMAX. What's your outlook for it?
I'd say Access Kenya is more or less being niched. It's a niche kind of a company in terms of the penetration, because you have to realize that it's still going to be in competition with the likes of Safaricom and once Zain markets it in terms of its fiber optic and broadband outlook. But what is unique about Access Kenya is that it has built a client base, and it has also dealt with that client base in terms of its specific offering. So going by it, there's still that brand of loyalty that Access Kenya will continue to have. So maybe it might end up competing in terms of prices, because when the likes of Safaricom come on board, pricing will be one of the key issues that might affect its revenue streams going forward.
We also saw dividend paying stocks such as BAT rise significantly during the week. As we get into next week, are there any significant market forces that we should be on the lookout for, and what are you placing your bets on?
I would say for today, I'd look at one stock, which is Mumias. BAT for sure, we've seen it because owing to that dividend close of books and things like that. But more or less, I'd look at in terms of acquiring Mumias Sugar as before the price rise. Safaricom is a give or take because there's still a lot of profit taking going on board. So that will have its various rising during the beginning of the week, fluctuating towards the end of the week. So give or take, I'd give 3 shares. I'll talk about Kenya Airways. We've seen the rise in its cargo volume. Then I'll look at Mumias Sugar. And finally, I'll talk about now the Kenya Power and Lighting, give or take, though it's a bit highly on the higher end in terms of pricing. But you need to look at pricing now vis-a-vis the returns in the future.